Anurag, hi. Good to have you with us. How have you been?
Thanks, Ashu, for having me. All good. How are things with you?
Doing well, Anurag. Keeping safe, trying to stay indoors. And I think that's a message to everybody,
Yeah,
who's watching this and out there.
absolutely agree with you.
Anurag, D2C has been, there's a lot of action which has been happening in the D2C category, right? And I think beauty and wellness is kind of, I think in any case, it's been one of the best performing categories, right? Even in e-commerce, right? I mean, you've had, brands like Nykaa which have come up, right? And they've built a phenomenal story, right? And now many D2C brands are coming up, which are essentially thriving on this ecosystem, right? The distribution ecosystem that has now been created, right?
Yeah,
And it makes it very, very exciting, right? And I think there is a renewed willingness, right, in the customers as well, especially I think post the COVID environment, right, where they want to try, more brands, they want to connect with more brands directly, right? And I think there's a beautiful relationship which is kind of evolving, right? And I think this makes it our discussion very interesting in that sense, because that's the category that you're focusing on, right?
yeah,
At Pilgrim, right? So before we dive into that, a quick round of introduction will be helpful, right? And then we move into our discussion for today.
yeah. So, Ashu, I come from Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh, small town, came to Bombay in
Right,
97 for my engineering from IIT Bombay.
right,
Uh, Spent 4 years. I don't know whether I learned engineering or not, but changed significantly as a person, made some lifelong friends. And overall, I think there was a lot of learning apart from chemical engineering. Uh, Post which I did my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad.
right,
Worked in the corporate sector for a couple of years, started my career with Tata Administrative Services, then worked with KPMG as a management consultant.
right,
And 2006 December is when I quit my corporate life and joined hands with a couple of friends and batchmates from IIM Ahmedabad.
right.
We started India's first chain of affordable spas in 2007.
Wow,
It's called Four Fountains. And
interesting.
yeah, from 2007 to 2018, we ran spas, we ran salons, we ran Ayurveda clinics.
Right,
So I've been a beauty and wellness guy for a fairly long time.
right,
Uh, and that's been broadly my entire professional life, except for the first couple of years, in the corporate sector.
right.
So I've followed this sector. I've been in the sector for a fairly long time. I've had the chance to speak with more than 5,000 consumers over the last 15 years.
Right,
And I've seen how consumer preferences have evolved, what they want, what they need,
right,
and how D2C and e-commerce and online retailing has really shaped up consumer preferences.
right.
And that was very exciting. That was very exciting and enriching to kind of notice, learn from.
Sure. Very interesting. Anurag, so you've been to the services business, right? And I think that's a business which requires, of course, a very different kind of an orientation, right? From that to product, right? What's been the what made you move towards, or start to focus on the product ecosystem, right? The Pilgrim. I mean, tell us a little more about the Pilgrim journey, right? In terms
Yeah.
of how do you sort of move into that?
So, like you said, Ashu, even in my previous ventures, there was always a product angle.
Right.
The difference was most cases the products were for in-house use
Sure.
rather than for retailing.
Mhm.
And it so happened that I was leading the R&D efforts for all of these products across brands.
Right.
The products we were retailing were actually products which were not our products but other brand products.
Right.
So if we were a salon, we were retailing L'Oreal. When we
Sure.
were running Ayurveda clinics, we were retailing some brands from Kerala. We were not
Right.
actually manufacturing and branding for ourselves.
Right.
So my fascination for product is as old as my relationship with beauty and
Right.
wellness sector.
Interesting.
When 2018 I kind of moved out of my previous roles,
Right.
and I was planning to look at what I should be doing next. Couple of things were fairly obvious.
Right.
The sector which was closest to my heart was beauty and wellness.
Right.
Uh, I had gained some level of understanding, some level of network within the sector, which provided me some edge to start in this sector.
Right.
D2C was a trend which was out there. You couldn't just ignore that there was a fairly
Right.
large opportunity across sectors, not just in personal care or beauty wellness, but across sector. D2C was already happening in a very big way. Incidentally, while all my previous ventures were offline, there was a strong digital component of driving
Sales.
leads online to drive sales offline.
Right.
And again, it so happened that I was instrumental in scaling up many of the digital efforts for my previous ventures.
Right.
While I always had a co-founding team, my
Sure.
roles tended to be on this side. So
Right.
in combination, it looked like a very interesting opportunity, and that's how Pilgrim was born.
Interesting.
Obviously there is a lot more clarity in terms of what Pilgrim is, what Pilgrim will be in future now, than when we were ideating this 2 years back.
Very interesting. I am particularly intrigued by the name in Pilgrim, right? I mean, how Pilgrim happened. Of course, we've talked about it offline, right? But I would love you to give us the story behind choosing a name Pilgrim, right? And it's quite a thought, right? Why don't you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. So what we did was when we decided that we wanted to launch something interesting in the beauty and wellness space, that was a starting point. We said, where are the white spaces in the market, where are the gaps, and what is it that consumers are looking for?
Right.
So we realized that a lot of international trends which were localized earlier,
right,
started going global. That was happening in the past, but there was a large time lag. But now the time lag had come down. So there was Ayurveda in India which had started going global. Right. At the same time, there were other traditions and other ingredient stories from other parts of the world which were also going global.
Right.
The challenge was many of these brands, when they came to India, one, their pricing was a little off from an India perspective for a variety of reasons.
Right.
One is the custom duties. Second is their own cost overheads. Third is they have to maintain a price parity across markets. So something which is $20 or $30 in the Western world may be fairly affordable there. But the moment you convert $20 into 1,500 rupees in India, it's no more as affordable as it is abroad.
Right.
So we realized, and then the brands, many of these brands also tended to be legacy brands, and hence they were used to having a monologue with the customers, rather than a dialogue and trying to build something along with the consumers.
Right.
So all of these put together, we realized that there was this inherent need for the well-traveled Indian consumers to experience borderless beauty from around the globe.
Interesting.
And that's what Pilgrim really offers. And obviously Pilgrim was not, the name was not coined then. And when we started looking, what is that, if you're on a journey to seek truths in the beauty space, what brand name would capture this the best?
Right.
And we obviously had a long list, like any other founder will tell you, they had a 50 or 100 name long list. The moment we came across Pilgrim as a thought, we said, this is what actually captures what we are trying to build. Pilgrim typically is in the religious or spiritual context where you are going from place to place in this journey of truth. That's what we are doing, just that the context is in the beauty and personal care space. But we are on a journey trying to find out truths from different parts of the world.
Pilgrim, where you're selling cosmetics, right? That's an interesting one, right? Anurag, you've been a player in the beauty and wellness space for a very long time, right? And you had a team, when you're doing the offline business, right? What is the team construct? I mean, did you carry some part of that team of the offline experience that you had to Pilgrim with you? What's the construct of the team in the current form?
Yeah, so currently we have a mid-sized team, Ashu. Now we are close to 30 odd people. But let me talk about the early days. Early days, it started off with me, taking up one seat in a co-working space. Then I met my co-founder and he kind of came on board on to what we were trying to build. Then the third employee was hired through a reference. A fourth employee or the fourth team member was also through a reference. And he happened to have worked with me in the past, but he had moved on to another role. Then the next person who joined the team happened through a reference of an ex-employee. So the early team members, in fact, all of them came through, either a direct connect or through somebody we knew and trusted very deeply. That was the early construct, and we had a 6-7 member team for a fairly long time. Only in the last 5-6 months have we now, hired more people, and now the team size is close to 30 people.
Very interesting. And when you, of course, I mean, I'll have a bunch of questions around the team construct, right? Which I'll possibly ask you, towards, as we progress in the conversation, right? But I'd love to know more about the product construct, right? I mean, I love the thesis, right? Of what you've, the way you've mentioned it, the way you've laid it out. It'll be amazing and it'll be interesting to know, what's the product construct like, right? What's the product catalog like? What are the kind of products that you're doing within the beauty and wellness space? Which are the pieces that you're going after? Because it's a fairly, diverse ecosystem, right? As soon as you start talking wellness, I mean, you include wellness in the beauty category, right? So tell me a little more about the catalog that you have, and which are the pieces that you're going after. How's been the client engagement, customer engagement, right? Those are going to be interesting points to understand.
Yeah. So let me first talk about our first range or first collection. So when we said that we want to be offering different experiences from different parts of the world, we said what are the different collections or ranges we will be doing over the next 2-3 years, and we made a long list of collections which we were excited about.
Right.
Within that, we said, Korean beauty was a hot trend internationally, not just in India. Korea has been the hub of innovation for a fairly long time. And we said, and when we started speaking to consumers, we realized that it was a clear gap in the market where there was awareness about K beauty, Korean beauty, but the product availability was not very high.
Right.
And when products were available, they were often not India price friendly. They were priced, in this dollar converted to rupee, and sometimes they tend to be heavy on the pocket from an India perspective. All of this kind of prompted us to launch the Korean beauty range first. When we had decided that Korean beauty is what we want to be doing, then we broke down the beauty category into 45 subcategories.
Okay.
And a lot of data is available, especially marketplaces. You can go and see how they have structured the categories and subcategories. Within that, how are the subcategories, if I can say so. And so we broke it down, into pieces, and we said, where is it that we want to play in the beginning?
Right.
Eventually, as a brand, we will have presence across all the 45 subcategories. In the beginning, we identified 10, which would, one, complete the collection. You need to be offering a complete range, a complete regimen to a consumer. At the same time, you want to test out a few different categories also in subcategories, so that learnings can come in. Right. So we did. We identified that there are 3 larger subcategories. There is bath and body, there is face care, and there is hair care.
Right.
Within that, there are these 45 subcategories which exist. So we launched products across the 3. We launched 2 products in the beginning in bath and body, 2 products in hair care, and 6 odd products in the face care.
Okay.
Yeah, and
that's a fairly diverse portfolio.
Yeah, that's a fairly diverse portfolio. The reasoning is, like I said, we wanted to kind of offer a complete regimen wherever we were going. One. Second, we also wanted to test out the different categories which were there and get learnings out of there.
Sure. Very interesting. Anurag, typically what happens is, early days are very difficult, right, for any business, right, and a D2C business, right. And so how was that period for you, right? I mean, of course, you did your research, right? There were products that you got. I'd love to have you, I'd love to have, a question on production as well, which I'll possibly ask, as we go along. But, how are the early days, right, of customer acquisition? Because, when you talk of beauty and wellness, right, the sensitivity of a customer is very high. And we're mostly targeting women, right? That makes it extremely complicated market, and a very aware market, right? Besides, of course, the complications that are there, right? What were the early days like, right, of, winning those customers, right?
So, the one word which comes to my mind is interesting. And I'll tell you why. We spent a good 8-9 months, or actually a little more, probably 10 months, researching, developing the products.
Right.
And we were ready for a launch in March 2020, which is when the lockdown happened.
Right.
So, right after having the products in our hand at the warehouses, when we wanted to sell, we couldn't.
Right.
Because the category was largely non-essentials. And then, a lot of friendly advice came in. Why don't you start selling sanitizers under Pilgrim? Because there seems to be a lot of demand, and whatever you make will sell. Right. But we said, no, we cannot get so short-term oriented that we will sell what what the market is asking in the short term. We want to stay true to the vision of Pilgrim. And we will offer only what Pilgrim can stand for.
Right.
Then March, April, until around mid of May, we were, all of us, the small team of 5, 6, 7 people we had, were sitting at home and quote unquote researching, which basically meant watching YouTube videos of other people who had been there, done that internationally. And so May is when we really launched. And when I say launched, we actually listed and started selling. Right. I don't even know if we can call it launch, because there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of skepticism when the lockdown opened. We didn't, and supply chain was broken.
Right.
So, people were scared. There was lack of clarity in terms of what the pandemic held for all of us individually, professionally. Sometimes couriers would happen, sometimes couriers would not happen. You were dependent on certain people at the warehouse to kind of come and open out, and then you realized, okay, today warehouse is not opening.
Right.
So many of these challenges were there in the early days, but we happened to be at the right time, in the right sector, I would say.
Right.
The beauty sector really took off quite well from May, and it continues to grow well. But I think the first 6-7 months for any D2C brand which was selling, online, it was a good time to be there. Right. We also saw a lot of early traction happening.
Right.
One, just because we were available.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we were fortunate in some sense. Second, we were available in the right manner.
Right.
What happens in the offline world is you can actually physically look, feel, touch the product.
Right.
Samplers are available.
Right.
You have a lot more closer engagement with the brand and the product before you actually make the purchasing decision.
Right.
What happens online is you are actually only seeing a product page.
Right.
And then making a purchase decision.
Right.
And hence it is very important for the brand to really communicate what the brand stands for through that one single page.
Correct.
And you would have seen our fascination for breaking down everything into smaller pieces.
Right.
So we said, okay, what does the product page really comprise of? So we said
right.
It comprises of a bunch of images.
Right.
The images not only need to look and feel premium, look and feel aesthetic, they also need to communicate what the brand stands for. They need to communicate how to use the product. They also need to communicate what the texture of the product is like.
Right.
So try and replicate the offline experience to the extent possible in an online environment.
Very interesting. Right.
Then we said, there is some amount of, growth hacking required.
Right.
There are certain searches which are happening on marketplaces.
Right.
So when you're writing your content has to be SEO friendly, so to say.
Right.
At the same time, it has to stand true to the product promise. You can't, go only the SEO route. Otherwise, you will end up writing content that is junk, and the consumers are not making sense out of it.
Right.
So you have to make that balance of how are you getting that marketplace queries are leading to your search page.
Right.
And their conversions have to happen through the imagery, through the kind of product promise you're making,
right,
through the kind of reviews which will happen on their own in an organic manner.
Right.
If and sometimes you will get negative feedback. How do you incorporate that further into your product development?
Mm-hmm.
So every single parameter of product which we thought we understood, there have been learnings around that. So we have learned a lot about what kind of packaging works, what kind of packaging doesn't work. Okay. We have learned about what kind of pricing works for different subcategories. Right. So to say, we are a mass premium brand or we operate in a certain price band,
right,
is, really a very blanket kind of a statement. What pricing
right,
works in a face wash is very different from the kind of pricing
totally
consumers are willing to pay for a face cream.
Right.
And the kind of price indexing which you do to competition brands also could be very different from each of these subcategories.
Right.
What kind of benefits they are looking for, what kind of textures are selling. So kind of textures which were popular 10 years back are not very popular today, and a completely different set of textures are popular today. And there is the second one part of that reason is because now people are spending a lot more time indoors.
Right.
So the kind of textures which were needed when women were stepping out were different.
Right.
Yeah. Versus what they need today when they are working from home are slightly different.
Right.
So every single parameter, every single variable of every product, I think there have been learnings, and there continue to be. We try and incorporate all those learnings in the new launches which we are doing, and try to offer what consumers are looking for.
Interesting. Anurag, typically, you launched amid pandemic, right? And typically when you're building a D2C brand, experiential and especially when you're doing something around cosmetics, and something that you also highlighted, right? It's very important to create that layer of experiential, right? And irrespective of how you replicate it, how beautifully you replicate it, right, online, I think there's always a touch and feel which is required, right? And this is also a segment where the customer is extremely sensitive to their requirement, right? How challenging has been conversions, right? In a case like this, what are the kind of numbers that you looked at, right, from a conversion standpoint?
So you're right, Ashu. Touch and feel will always help. But given, like I said, the sector has benefited from the pandemic. While it has done a lot of bad things for everything else, the entire D2C sector, within that, the beauty sector has benefited, and we are one of the beneficiaries very clearly. Incidentally, the beauty sector was anyway growing like 50-60% year on year online. As a sector, it was growing.
Right.
So if you're offering something relevant, it was, and consumers, and you were willing to listen to what consumers needed, I think there was a large opportunity anyway.
Right.
So the offline experience can almost never be replicated 100% online. Right. But coming specifically to your question of what kind of conversions we are seeing, we normally see slightly better conversions than the industry benchmarks.
Right.
Whether it is on marketplaces, so marketplaces, obviously the conversion percentages are slightly better because the trust and on the ecosystem of the marketplace. So let's say if you're selling on Amazon, if you're selling on Nykaa, the trust on Amazon itself is very high that the delivery experience will be taken care of. Yeah, and if there was a lapse in the experience, Amazon will take care of the lapse and provide you with a refund and all of those things.
Right.
So that trust in the early days helps any new brand.
Right.
When you're selling from your own website, trust is required at two levels.
Sure.
The brand trust is required that the brand will actually benefit me by if I indulge in the brand.
Right.
And the second is the delivery experiences, warehousing, customer service, refunds, all of that.
Right.
So in the early days, the second part of the brand experience, which is about delivery experience, etc., is not completely known to the consumers. Reviews are not there. So the conversion percentages are slightly lower than compared to a marketplace.
Right, interesting. Anurag, I mean, when I look at Pilgrim, right, and when I look at many characteristics that you highlight, right, of the product, what is that one piece which has worked for you? I mean, in the sense that you think that made it work, right? For example, I mean, you advocating, toxin free, for example, right? You're talking about 100% vegan, right? Cruelty free, right? And there are like quite a few characteristics that you're doing, right? That is part of the branding process as well, right? Which is that one piece you think has worked well for you, right? In that scheme of things, which essentially helps you, basically the customer relate with the product better, right? Of course, product has to stand for itself, but these are certain elements around it, which just bring in a certain seriousness in the mind of the consumer about the production and the producer, right? In terms of how they are looking at, addressing, or what kind of a responsibility do they have towards the ecosystem, right? What is that one thing which you think is clicked for you?
So Ashu, I'll answer this in two parts.
Sure.
And both will be slightly contradictory.
Right.
Because you've asked me for one thing, I will say, the brand resonated quite well with the consumers. I think consumers were looking for a brand like Pilgrim, which offered international beauty, ingredients, international beauty trends at a price point which was acceptable to Indian consumers.
Sure.
For a fairly long period of time, consumers thought we were about Korean beauty only,
right?
Because we had only one range, which was a Korean beauty range.
Right.
Over a period of time, that changed to, okay, they have two ranges, which is a Korean beauty range and a French phenotherapy range. Eventually, consumers will realize that, we are going to do so much more, and that will take some time to evolve. And we are not in a hurry to establish that.
Sure.
Because every range has to establish its trust, its credibility, Absolutely. Why consumers should be buying that range,
right.
Even if they're buying into Pilgrim, because Pilgrim itself will be offering them variety.
Right.
So that is, part one. Part two, which will be both in agreement and a little bit of contradiction to what I said in part one. It is never one thing, which can really make you click.
Right.
That's the belief we have at Pilgrim.
Right.
Everything has to come together. Right. So it is, so if the consumer has discovered your brand on a marketplace or, through a Facebook ad and they've come to your website, what is when they look at the website or they look at the product page on the marketplace, is it inspiring trust?
Right.
Yeah, and it's a very intangible kind of a quality to kind of quantify.
Right.
So is it inspiring trust in the minds of consumers that they can go ahead and buy the product?
Right.
Is the brand vision, are the values which the brand is communicating resonating with them? Is it at a price which they are willing to try the product at? What are the reviews of the brand which the other consumers have left, if it's a marketplace or even the website? If consumers have discovered us on a marketplace, they are definitely going to go and check us out on social media. Right. What is the feed they are saying? What is the kind of conversations which are happening there?
Right.
What is the kind of messaging as a brand we are doing that?
Right.
So it is all of these elements put together, which is finally, responsible for the brand resonating or not resonating.
Right.
So it is not one thing to my mind which will help us sell or not sell. Everything, if we do right, which is when I think, we have a proposition for the consumers. Otherwise, consumers are spoiled for choices. And why should they buy Pilgrim at all?
No, I understand where you're coming from, and I think I kind of understand. So what I essentially meant was essentially a responsibility in brand, right? And I think today the consumer is very sensitive, and I think what we've gone through has also sort of made us, I think look for a brand which is responsible, right? Because I think that's something which is now kind of coming in us, right? As consumers, I think especially after the COVID kind of an environment, right? Anurag, one question that I have, and is and this is something that I talk to many D2C startups, right? And this is something that we try and understand, right? Is that marketplaces are a brilliant mechanism, right? And like you said, there is a certain trust ecosystem and there's a certain trust relationship that the consumer has with that marketplace, right? And that automatically you get as a new brand, as as an upcoming brand, you get a rub off of that, right? But marketplaces are opaque, right? You're not necessarily getting to engage with your customer directly, which is essentially what the thesis of D2C is, right? And that in a way limits your relationship with your customer, right? How do you view that? Eventually, I think every single brand is trying to build a direct relationship, right? How do you view that? I mean, I understand where you're coming from. That you require a continuity as a brand. I mean, be it on marketplaces, be it independent, right? Be it on social media, and so on and so forth, right? But eventually, it's about your relationship as a brand owner or a brand with the consumer, right? And so, how do you see this relationship evolve, right? And how do you see the relationship, or how do you see the journey of Pilgrim, right, in terms of engaging with customers directly?
I think they go completely hand in hand, Ashu. So
Sure.
we quite like the convenience which marketplaces offer,
Sure.
the trust which they offer. It provides a head start to all young brands.
Right.
So any young brand which has to build only a D2C channel will take much longer to kind of spread awareness,
Right.
build the trust, etc. Versus if you're available across channels.
Sure.
Uh, the interesting thing is for Pilgrim, more than 50% of our sales comes from branded searches.
Okay.
Which means consumers are actually searching for a Pilgrim face wash and then buying the product.
Interesting.
Versus how many people are searching for a face wash for oily skin or a face wash generic keyword,
right,
and then discovering Pilgrim. Obviously, this was not the case 12 months back, but
right,
we hit this milestone fairly early. We hit this milestone in probably 5 or 6 months of our launch.
right.
That 50% of our sales consistently has been through branded searches.
Okay.
Which inspires us a lot of confidence that people are still willing, wanting to buy the brand. But, there is a lot of convenience. And because people are not buying only a Pilgrim face wash, they're buying so many other products from a marketplace, whether within the beauty category or even otherwise.
Right.
And that is something we can never offer. So, if a woman has probably 10 or 12 products which she's regularly using on the skincare, hair care side, our dream will be that all 10, 12 are Pilgrim. But till that time, we are not able to, reach or fulfill that dream in its entirety. Even if you're able to replace 4 or 5 of our in the products in our bag, we'll be happy. And there, if I have to think from a consumer's perspective that I have to buy 3 different brands to make my kitty of 10 products, I'm actually better off on a marketplace from a convenience perspective.
Right.
And hence, on the D2C side, we have to work harder to tell them why you should be buying from the brand side at all.
Right.
Which is where the entire relationship building, and it has to go beyond discounting. So to say that I will price better on my website is not the answer in the long term.
Right.
We have to go far beyond that. So we have a consumer delight program. Loyalty program is not a word we like internally too much. Right. Because loyalty, you have to delight the consumers to kind of stick with us.
Right.
Loyalty is not for human beings, really. In that context. So we have a delight program called Pilgrim Tribe. Right. Which is one to begin with is designed in a very simple manner.
Right.
You purchase something and you get for every 100 rupees you spend, you get 10 miles.
Right.
And that 1 mile is not 43 paisa or 4 paisa or 8 paisa, it is 1 rupee.
Right. Interesting.
So we have all been
thanks for clarifying that one.
We have all been felt disappointed when we had 50,000 points through a credit card or some brand, and then realized that it's worth only 2,500 rupees.
Right.
So you were busy doing the mental math, and it's just not worth it. So we said whatever we can offer, we'll make it very simple for consumers to understand.
Right.
And while right now one of the offerings is that you can redeem it online, the idea is to make it much larger.
Right.
Pilgrim as a brand, while our business will be selling beauty products, we are more than that. We are about offering borderless experiences. So we will offer cultural experiences which are unique to a certain region if you're launching a range.
Right.
We will also take the brand offline in terms of events and experience.
Very
and this entire community which we are trying to build, that will be the reason for people to buy from us through the website.
Right.
And not that we can give you a 5% better price compared to a marketplace.
Very interesting. I think, Anurag, that's a very evolved way of looking at it. That's a very mature way of looking at it, right? I mean, and I think that maturity and that patience and that willingness to give it that time, I think possibly comes with experience, right? And you've been in this for such a long time, right? And it's heartening to see this, right? And I think that's how essentially brands are made, right? without necessarily being in a zone where you are rushing for numbers, right? And you're trying to, kind of scramble through things and, trying to sort of get to something which you can justify, right, to investors. I think that's not how brands are made, right? I think brands are made by engaging with customers in the right form and way, right, and giving it the right time to be doing that, right. And like I said, it's heartening to see that. Anurag, I want to move to essentially understanding the consumer side of it, right? And there is a certain journey that you had. You have a solid engagement. There's a beautiful continuity that you're building across various platforms, and there's like literally a storyline which is coming together, right? How's been the customer's experience with the brand, right? What are the kind of numbers that you have on repeats, right? How's the wallet share increasing across, say, a certain this thing? And you can possibly start with persona, right? In terms of how do you dissect a customer, which is your what's your customer like, and then from there you can give me a number in terms of what are the repeats, how are you placed on the wallet share side of things and stuff.
Yeah. So the one interesting fact I want to highlight, Ashu, is that 70% of our consumers are beyond the top 10 towns.
Okay. Wow.
So only 30% of our sales comes from the top 10 towns, which will include your metros and semi-metros to some extent.
Right.
Right. And we are very happy with that.
Right.
Because we want to be, not be a metro-centric brand. We want to really talk to everybody in India who's interested in what we have to offer.
Sure.
Because women tend to be a lot, use a lot more subcategories of the beauty. 70% of our consumers tend to be women.
Right.
We'll be happy if that changes to 50-50 and men also start using a lot more, product categories. But so far, I think women are a little more open to doing a 5-step skincare regime, etc., than men.
Right.
And we don't have a male grooming range dedicated to men around beard grooming, etc., right now.
Sure.
And hence, women, our consumers tend to be on the younger side, largely in the 20 to 30 kind of age group.
Okay.
We also cater to older age groups, but the bulk of the consumers tend to be in this 20 to 30 kind of age group.
Right.
But I think what is more important to understand is what is the psyche of this consumer who's buying into Pilgrim.
Mm-hmm.
So she's somebody who's already hooked on to what is happening internationally in a very big manner.
Right.
And hence she is aspiring for those products, those trends to be made available to her.
Right.
In a convenient manner, in an accessible manner, in an affordable manner.
Right.
Yeah. And the kind of consumer awareness and education which is there, it is mind-blowing. So we, get into very technical and R&D led discussions with our consumers many a times, where consumers are saying, okay, why have you added this ingredient at this dosage and not the other ingredients? I have heard that these two ingredients don't go well together, but you seem to be using. So what I've heard, is that not correct? Or what is the right answer here?
Right.
So it is very heartening to kind of engage with consumers at this level, because consumers are genuinely looking for more and more information, and the more you put out, they'll gulp down everything.
Right.
And it's a good trend, I would say.
Right.
Once in a while, there is misinformation which is out there, and you have to fight that misinformation.
Right.
Which is an extra effort, but that's a part of the game, I would say. Overall, I think this entire phenomenon about wanting to know more about everything you are doing, saying what the brands are saying, what is happening internationally, I think that's a very good trend which is happening, not just in our sector, perhaps it is also happening in other sectors.
Right. Very interesting. Anurag, I'll tell you what. So I have had a thesis, right, around, what's happening in tier 2 and, the information arbitrage that existed, right, between, say, a tier A market and a tier 2 market, right? And I think COVID has been a very unreal year because, people have consumed from same screen. So I think that arbitrage has kind of gone away now because, that arbitrage essentially was a function of the physical infrastructure which was created, right? And now that the physical infrastructure is gone and information is now available and everybody's consuming from the same screen, right? I think those smaller markets are going to behave exactly like larger markets, right? I think, and the disposable incomes, of course, increasing. Savings is of course, it's temporarily gone down, but it's going to shape up well. Those are certain macros which are playing out very well. But that said, tier 2 consumer still comes from a point where they're not exposed to many things, right? They'll still be dependent on the existing brands, the visible brands, right? And that's been the tendency, right? What has clicked for you? I mean, is it the communication which has clicked for you? Is it because they were looking for something already, or they were exposed to some sort of content which was, say, flying and floating? on the net, they got exposed to that, and this became an incidental, right? So, or was this calibrated at your end, right? I mean, how did you manage to crack into, say, for example, the tier two? Because 70% is a massive contribution. I think not a lot of D2C brands today enjoy that kind of a contribution from, when they look at their, revenues and P&Ls.
Yeah. So I think the aspiration was already there, Ashu.
Right.
Yeah. Because of social media, because of YouTube, and the kind of information which is available.
Right.
The aspiration was already there. So we are not trying to offer something which was completely unknown.
Right.
We are offering something for which the aspiration was there, the consumer need was already there. Now we are making it available and talking the language which they want to talk.
Right.
So just being able to connect to our consumers in the manner they were looking for, and make an offering which was relevant to them.
Right.
So they were waiting for this kind of a product in a brand like Pilgrim. I think that's what I would say.
No, but tell me this, right? So there are 20 other brands that are there. I mean, there are 20 other brands which are offering the same thing. They are available on the same marketplace, right? They're possibly spending a higher dollar to acquire that customer, right? What, for example, worked for you, right? I mean, if you are to, for example, dissect it, right?
Yeah.
How would you dissect it, saying that this is what worked for us, right?
Yeah.
What is that one thing which worked? I mean, possibly that could be a part of your secret sauce, right? But I'm saying, what is that one thing, if you were to sort of give it out, right? What is that?
Ashu, like I said, we have to go back to why the brand resonates with the consumers.
Sure.
So if consumers were looking for Korean beauty products, K-beauty products,
right,
what was available were brands which they did not relate to and which they could not afford.
Right.
So there was a disconnect at two levels. That these brands were speaking a language which the consumers did not relate to, because consumers today want a dialogue, not a monologue.
Right.
And that's true for any D2C brand. That's not true just for Pilgrim or for a beauty category brand. If you are not willing to engage with the consumers and co-create the entire brand and product offering,
right,
then there is going to be a challenge in scale out.
Interesting.
So people were looking for Korean beauty products.
Right.
Yeah, but not accessible, not available.
Right.
We have made it accessible. We have made it affordable in a manner which they would have liked. The community is built by consumers for consumers, right?
Right.
Then the second range, if you see, venotherapy. So we did a lot of dipsticks around, whether venotherapy as a concept. Korean beauty was a fairly large phenomenon, and you couldn't have missed it. If you were in the beauty category, you couldn't have missed Korean beauty as a concept in India. Venotherapy was very, very small. But when we did a dipstick, there was a niche and core set of audience which knew about venotherapy.
Right.
That audience was small.
Sure.
But second, when we spoke about the concept of venotherapy to consumers who were not completely aware, there was a lot of excitement. The kind of excitement we normally don't see for regular products. That's the kind of excitement which was there. Which is when it led to a belief that while the core there exists a core community which is looking for venotherapy products, and we are perhaps one of the few brands or the only brand in India which offers venotherapy.
Right.
We are perhaps the first brand to offer venotherapy in India.
Very interesting.
So it's not available. So you're right that a face wash of 10 kinds or 100 kinds are available.
Right.
The venotherapy face wash is not available at all. So if you're looking for a very specific offering, and that's where D2C brands have to create, right? D2C brands have to go and identify niche opportunities.
Right.
And niche in the Indian context is huge.
But, seeding niche is also expensive, right? I mean, it's a bet that you're taking, not knowing how the market is going to behave, right? Because, I mean, when you start looking at India, I mean, I agree with your point, right? I mean, quantitatively, we are very large, right? But as soon as you start looking at India, I mean, there are regionalities that we have. That within regions, there are complexities that are there. I mean, it's a fairly complex market, right? I mean, our behaviors are different, our priorities are different, our earning levels are different. I mean, you know what I mean, right? It just complicates it to a degree which is unimaginable, right?
Which is exactly the D2C opportunity, Ashu.
Right.
See, if I am a large $5 billion MNC or Indian company,
sure,
and have an offline distribution to million stores,
right,
there are only so many SKUs I can offer. The opportunity for a D2C brand is to identify these niche opportunities.
Right.
Right. And have a long tail.
Right.
This is definitely true in our category. I have a sense that this is true for most D2C categories. So if I have to offer a multi-purpose face cream,
right,
that opportunity does not belong to Pilgrim.
Interesting.
That opportunity belongs to one of the larger players.
Right.
I have to go and identify a very niche opportunity which is unviable for the larger MNCs to operate in. But there is an inherent need. People are already looking for this product.
Right.
The moment you start offering, you will make a core, set of customers or a set of consumers who were looking for this and said, okay, where were you before?
Right.
Why did you launch today? Not 6 months back.
Interesting.
And if you're able to replicate this 50 times over, 100 times over through each of our product offerings, and also, bind them in the brand vision that whatever your, because see, so you speak to any woman and the one statement she is going to tell you is, yaar, mera skin na bahut alag hai. So if there are 50 crore women in India, 50 crore women are saying, yaar, mera na skin bahut hi alag hai. Ye na sabse alag hai. Mera skin bahut sensitive hai. Mera skin. So every woman genuinely believes that my skin is different, my needs are very different. Right. So you can't have a generic offering for all women.
Right.
So which is where the opportunity for a brand like Pilgrim is that how can we go and identify something very specific to your needs,
right,
and try and fulfill it. So, when I said, if a woman is buying 10, 12 products, it will be a dream to be able to sell all the 10 to her from Pilgrim.
Right.
Because till the time we have not made an offering, because for each subcategory, each subcategory, there are multiple needs, consumer needs, which are possible.
Right.
So we actually have a grid. We have an Excel sheet saying, this skin type, this concern, this. There are 20 kinds of face washes we have identified we need to be offering eventually.
Right.
We have only 2 right now. So Pilgrim does not even have the right to go and say that every woman should be buying me.
Right.
Women where we are able to meet the consumer's need, only they should be buying us right now.
Very interesting. Anurag, honestly, I think this is a conversation that I'm loving, right? I'm loving each part of it, right? And I think more importantly, right? I've said this earlier. I'm going to repeat it, right? I love the fact that you're giving it the right time, right? Which is so important, right? You're not rushing through. I think that patience is so much more important. Anurag, production is a very big challenge. When you talk about D2C, right? When you talk about especially, beauty, right? And while there are manufacturers, of course, MOQs becomes a challenge, right? Procurement is in itself an issue, ensuring consistency, ensuring what goes in, right? I mean, it's a very difficult environment to sort of operate in, right? We're still sort of building that infrastructure, the delivery infrastructure in that sense, right? How has that been for you? I mean, how have you been able to manage and maintain the required consistency, in the product lines, right? And the experience, of course, at a product line.
So, Ashu, my fundamental belief is that as a company, as the founding team, you need to have some unfair advantages over the rest of the market.
Right.
Which is what will help you stand out and scale and be successful.
Right.
For us, the unfair advantage is the 15 years of goodwill, network, domain experience we have gathered.
Interesting.
After making tons and tons of mistakes, and we continue to make new ones, hopefully, and not repeat the old ones.
Right.
So I think this network has been fairly helpful. This entire ecosystem, which was our unfair advantage, has been very helpful.
Right.
Right. So, like you said, the quality control in the entire process is extremely important.
Right.
Because you are going to intimately impact the face of the consumer or the hair of the consumer. And if you end up delivering a subpar experience, forget that consumer. Her entire friends, family, social ecosystem is going to kind of, write you off for the rest of your life.
I completely agree. Right.
Yeah? So very, it's a very important part of the entire offering that quality control is done, and it is done at different levels.
Right.
Formulations are FDA approved, but that's like a statutory requirement. We test them out thoroughly. Sometimes we do derma testing where required. Otherwise, we have a large pool of willing volunteers. We are a cruelty-free brand, so we don't test on animals throughout our supply chain. But we have a large pool of willing volunteers, friends, family, who broadly know कि यार ये लोग देंगे तो कुछ गड़बड़ तो नहीं निकलेगा. So who are willing to try our products before launch, and we do many hundreds of such trials before we actually hit the market.
Right.
Then within the manufacturing, you like you said, you need the right manufacturing partners to kind of help you in the journey, and which is the unfair advantage we have had, that people who would normally not work with younger brands have been very open to working with us because they have believed in the vision of Pilgrim.
Right.
We have lowered MOQs for us. whenever there has been a need. They have given us cost support whenever we have needed.
Right.
So this ecosystem has been very, very supportive. There is a quality control which is required at every step. So when raw material is received, there is QC required. When a production batch happens, there is QC required. There is QC required much later in the future to make sure that nothing has gone bad. So there's this entire QC process which is in place. Part of it is dependent in-house, part of it is done in-house, and part of it is dependent on the manufacturing partners. And if you are able to work with the larger guys, you benefit from the good work they are already used to doing, because the kind of brands they are already working are have put those processes in place.
Right. Very interesting. Anurag, what's the ecosystem, I mean, within the team, right? How much of the team do you have towards, which is dedicated towards, say, working on new formulations, right? And of course, on the R&D, right? Because is that in-house, or is that still with the partner production entity, right, which is working with you?
Yeah. So it is a mix of both, Ashu. We realize that, how many ever people you have in-house, whether 1 or 10, every R&D specialist will have some learnings which are very useful.
Right.
So instead of depending on only 1, 2, 3 people, why not collaborate with multiple people across the globe? Yeah. And now, even earlier, so the one ecosystem which India has enjoyed is the pharma ecosystem.
Right.
This often gets missed out in the beauty context.
Right.
Because India was the global hub for manufacturing for pharma, the quality standards many of these pharma companies set out and the ecosystem they created for suppliers, R&D, was very high-end.
Okay.
That ecosystem is now available to beauty brands if you want to tap into.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You also have some very experienced and senior R&D people coming out of very large companies who have spent their life decades and decades, doing in-house research for one company, one brand, who now have their own R&D outfits. So we collaborate with them on some products. Some products we collaborate with our manufacturing partners because they have very beautiful in-house R&D setup, who in turn then have R&D collaborations across the globe. So this entire network of R&D is available if you want to tap into it and you know how to tap into it. In combination, if the intent is that you will eventually figure out how to kind of get plugged down to this ecosystem. And so, for every product, we have the option of multiple R&D partners to kind of explore where they are good at. And now, we enjoy a relationship where they tell us upfront, yaar, ye wala nahi hoga. Or you will not be happy. You will not be happy with, what we deliver in this product category. But you have not even asked us for this product category, where we have, done some cutting edge work. So at least try it out. So it's about engaging with different R&D partners to see what each of them are bringing to the table, and opening multiple doors instead of saying, "Nahi, hum ye do log hain in-house, unke saath hi kaam karenge."
Right. Interesting. Anurag, this is possibly, say, the first phase of where Pilgrim is, right? And of course you have identified certain categories. There are certain products that you've built, right? Now each new product introduction is an exercise, right? And of course you have a certain foundational data, right, to support you, right, in terms of what's going to work, what's not going to work, right? But what's that selection criteria for introducing that new product, right? That's one question. And second is, at what stage do you introduce? Is this an ongoing process, saying that, listen, sales will continue to happen the way it does, right? We will continue to move it and maneuver it and navigate it, right, in the kind of waters that product is, and innovation is an independent process, right? We need to keep innovating, right? Or is there a point saying that this is what the product journey is, this is where we have a product just for, say, category A within a certain set, and then there is a continuous product that you're going to launch, which could be, say, a product B for the same category, right? Once you've done a certain number of certain sales, for example, right, or certain target region, and you have certain performance numbers and so on and so forth, right? What's that map like, right? When you choose to identify that new product and launch that new product, because of course resources, business always in a resource constrained environment, right? That goes without saying, right? So what goes into that new product identification to launch, right? What is that journey like?
So it is consumer backwards, Ashu.
Sure.
Like I said, for D2C brands and specifically for Pilgrim, there is only one way of life, which is to identify what consumers need and serve it.
Sure.
So we have identified probably a roadmap of 100 consumer needs across subcategories.
Right.
Right. And those 100 products have to get launched.
Right.
To begin with, and there will be
Right.
more. Right. There will be more. And I'll give you an example. So typically, acne is a problem with consumers with oily skin will face.
Right.
But there is a set of consumers who have dry skin and have acne.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the kind of products you will offer to a consumers who's looking for a solution for acne and has oily skin will be very different from what a dry skin consumer will need.
Right.
In the long term, we need to be catering to both, irrespective of the size of the segment.
Right.
If there is a consumer need, we need to have an offering around that.
Right?
This entire grid is already in place.
Okay.
Now we go back and say, what is the best way to serve these needs in a phased manner? And we break it down into new product launches, new range launches.
Right.
And an entire plan is drawn out for the next 10, 12 months to say that this is how we will go on filling, serving consumer needs.
Right.
And once that is done, we would have identified more consumer needs by then,
right,
where there is a gap. Or, even a consumer need could have changed, evolved, new consumer need could have been born. And we will go on going more and more niche in future and serving. Even if we have to make a product for one single consumer, we will do that.
Right. Wow, that's a commitment of a very different kind, Anurag. Anurag, COVID has changed the ecosystem, right? COVID has changed, for example, how Indians took care of their skin, for example, right? And of course, we were exposed to a lot of dust. Temperature zones were very different, right? It's been fairly complex as far as that bit is concerned, right? And I think many companies, which have been built, right, which have been catering to consumers for such a long time, right, had no other option but to go horizontal, right, because of the local complexity, right. COVID has essentially kind of changed the rules of the game in the sense that now we're in for a very different kind of a work ecosystem, right? So we will still have. There are going to be lesser people who are going to actually venture out, right? And there are going to be larger set of people who are going to be working from home, and they could come from tier 2, tier 3 cities, and so on and so forth, right? And the priorities are going to change, right? What is your sense of that, right? How has that changed the game for you, right? Of course, you were a brand which came right in the thick and thin of COVID, right? But then now, as the market gets back to normal, right? And of course, certain things are going to get set in a certain form and way. I think those trends are going to become clear, right? But what is it that you make out of it, right? What are your how is the product range going to change shape, for example, to align and suit that change in requirement?
Yeah. So Ashu, very interesting you point that out. Our belief is that consumer habits are very, very difficult to form or change.
Right.
And once they have formed or changed, changing them again is going to be a big task.
Right.
There is something fundamentally which has changed over the last 1 year, like you rightly said. A lot of our professional workforce is now a lot more distributed. And when I speak to my friends in tech companies, they are saying that they had a 400 people team working out of Bangalore, and now 350 are in tier 2 towns or tier 1 towns.
Right.
Many of them are not looking to come back at all. So the companies are forced to change their way of working to facilitate remote working in the long term.
Right.
This fundamental change is here to stay. Companies which are going back to office also, our belief is that many of them will offer a hybrid working, where you come to office a couple of days a week and work from home a couple of days a week.
Right.
The one big change which has happened in this overall scenario is that the focus on wellness, the focus on health, the focus on fitness across different human dimensions, whether physical, whether mental, whether skin, whether hair, has gone up exponentially.
Right.
So mental health is no more a taboo now, right? So if somebody is feeling stressed out, they're saying, I'm feeling stressed out, I need to do something about it.
Right.
We have heard about how all counselors are now stressed out that they are doing so much counseling and they are seeking mental health.
Right.
Which in some ways is a good trend, that something which was seen as a taboo and people were not willing to talk about.
Right.
People are saying, yes, this is an acceptable part of my everyday life.
Right.
Yoga, meditation, wellness routines are now such a much bigger part of our lives than it was.
Right.
The same is happening to skincare, hair care.
Mm-hmm.
So if earlier people were looking to modify the way they look and feel, now people are saying, how can I enhance the inherent, health of my skin?
Right.
So skin positivity is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as a brand, we want to stand for happiness,
right,
within the organization and for our consumers. So we don't go and put out scary images, of any kind, or put out before after images. We kind of
Right.
stay away from that. If what we are encouraging consumers is to think about hair wellness, skin wellness, bath and body wellness.
Right.
Take care of the health of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
That also, if you would like to, we are nobody to tell you that you should be doing this or you should not be doing this.
Right.
If you're interested in doing it, we have an offering. Please check us out and see whether we fit the bill of what your requirements are.
Right.
We don't want to be in the business of hard sell where we take up a high pedestal and say this is what is good for you or this is what you should be doing. No.
Right.
Consumers are the ones who are going to tell us that this is what I want, and if we have an offering which is relevant to them, they will buy us.
Right.
The macro trend of focus on skincare versus color cosmetics, right? I think is there. So which is benefiting us.
Right.
We are happy to be kind of a beneficiary there from the macro trend.
Anurag, that automatically, you walked me into my next question, right? Which is, that is a comfort and the way which you're dealing with things, right? The way you're working to build this entity, right? Also talks about how you're funded, right? I mean, the time that you're giving it, right? Unfortunately, in a venture funded environment, right, there's a certain rush, right? You are, if the market doesn't exist, you're out there to sort of seed the market, right? To change that behavior, that habit, right? You don't seem to be in a rush, right? How is Pilgrim? How are you seeding it, right? I mean, how are you doing it? Because it's a very different thesis that you're working on, right? It's a very patient game that you are, you're building, right? You're giving the consumer the right time, right? You're not necessarily out there to push, right? So you're not there hammering in, the before after, for example, right? Or saying that I'm going to make you look like the best, right? I think your thesis is very different, where you're saying that listen, we are available, right? This is what we stand for. This is what the value system is. This is the ethos, right? This is what the brand is, right? You like it, you choose it. You kind of sort of experiences, right? How is Pilgrim funded, right? I know it's a difficult question, but and I leave it to you in terms of how you want to answer it, right? But I would love to know, right? Because this is a very different zone that you're operating in. I want to understand your mind on that one.
Yeah. So we were very fortunate to have some great investors on board right from the beginning.
Right.
2 years back when we incorporated the company, we had some friends and family kind of come together to help us do a seed round.
Right.
We raised a little less than 2 crores.
Right.
And every single person who participated in that round was known to me for a fairly long period of time. There was no business plan which I shared. There was a deck which basically, there was a 10-slide deck because I just felt it was a moral responsibility to send out something
right.
which basically said we are going to launch beauty products.
Right.
And it spoke about, beauty is an exciting category. Google searches are going up. Such a generic gyan, which if you look at it, you will say, why would anybody fund this?
Right.
But, a friend of mine says that, early days, friends, family, and fools are who, invest in venture capital funds. Act as VC. So
right.
Friends and family, were the category I tapped into. In fact, I remember one interesting conversation where I had our fundraise was basically 3 WhatsApp messages.
Right.
So I've been a part of various communities, which are basically, your hostel groups, dorm groups, batch groups, all of that. I sent out 3 WhatsApp messages and the fundraise was broadly done.
Right.
And I remember that one friend of mine who committed like a good chunk of money.
Right.
After 3 days, I said, okay, by the way, do you have a deck? I said, yes, I sent out the deck to everyone before I... said, no, I don't seem to have received the deck.
Right.
So I then checked and realized that I've actually missed sending the deck to him.
Right.
And he had already committed without even knowing what I was doing.
Right.
So that's the kind of investors we had in the seed round.
Right.
And the second round happened with Fireside Ventures and Rukam Capital.
Right.
We happened to meet Vinay Singh, who's the founding partner along with Maljit at Fireside Ventures.
Right.
And we happened to get chatting through a common friend, in Jan 2020.
Right.
And the one thing I really liked about Fireside and Vinay, because for me, the contact person was Vinay for a fairly long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Every month, he would religiously make a call and ask me one question: how can I help you?
Right.
And actually spend 60 to 90 minutes of his precious time.
Right.
Sharing whatever they were seeing in the market, how things were evolving, making connects. And I was shameless in asking help.
Right.
So I knew that they had some proprietary documents which they had made for their portfolio companies.
Right.
First call, I've just got introduced. I said, Vinay, I know that there's this set of documents which you give out only to your portfolio companies.
Right.
We're not looking to raise money. Will you send it to us? Will you send it to us?
Right.
And very kind of Vinay to kind of say, Naini, use it, just use your discretion in terms of not kind of widely publishing.
Right.
But and that kind of cemented the relationship to an extent that there was no two thoughts when Fireside got interested in finally saying that they were interested. When we, they were the ones who actually pushed, saying, why are you not doing a fundraise?
Right.
You are of a certain scale, and we would like to look at this officially and not just continue the informal discussion.
Right.
And I was convinced that if they were officially a part of this with skin in the game, they would spend so much more time, more resources, helping us navigate and helping us build what we want to build at Pilgrim.
Right.
That's how our fundraise journey started, because we were anyway out there in the market. We met many other fronts. We were fortunate to kind of receive interest from some more. We got chatting with Rukam, and we really enjoyed the conversations which we had with Archana and the rest of the team. And we more than anything else, see, Fireside was willing to write the entire round for us. But more than anything else, we wanted Rukam to be a part of this deal because of the people we met at Rukam. We said, we will try and create at least some space for Rukam also to participate. And that happened. Thankfully, and I'll tell you the IC call which we had at Rukam. And all entrepreneurs are fairly ambitious in terms of the sales numbers. And we are also ambitious, but we are not paranoid about it, but we are also ambitious. They looked at our numbers and they said, yaar, itna aggression kyun dikha rahe ho? Half cut kar do, 1/3 cut kar do, we don't care. So that's the kind of feedback we have had. He said, yaar, ye commit karoge, achieve bhi karoge, we will say, theek hai, business plan achieve kiya. But iska 1/3 commit karoge and yadi usse exceed karoge, so all of us will be so much happier. So why to commit these numbers at all? So that's the kind of investors we have. Fireside almost never asks us, kya numbers hue hain, kya nahi hue. The only thing they ask us is, ye month mein kiya kya hai?
Interesting.
So what they call as inputs. What is it that you have done? What is your right to win in the market? How are you serving consumers better this month than what you were doing 2 months back or 3 months back? And the fundamental belief, I think, with both our investors and internally is that if we do the right things from a consumer's point of view, sales ho hi jayega. But if we slip on, doing right to the consumers, even if sales are happening in the long term, they'll not continue. So I think we are fortunate to have investors who don't put a sales pressure, but put a lot of consumers. Last call with Rukam and some senior people who mentor the Rukam team. They only kept asking, yaar, consumer delight ke liye kya kar rahe ho? Yaar, consumer delight ke liye kya kar rahe ho? How can you improve the consumer delight? Zero discussion on sales, zero discussion on anything else. The entire 1 hour, and a very senior person from Rukam's team, who's actually a sponsor for the Rukam's fund.
I understand who you're talking
about. So he came and said, yaar, consumer delight ka batao, baki sab ho jayega. Tell me what you are doing today. Tell me what your roadmap is. Tell me where we can help you improve the consumer delight.
Very interesting. Anurag, is that an aberration?
Sorry?
I'm saying, is that an aberration?
So Ashu, I don't know, because I've not worked with a lot of investors in the past. So I don't know
what you see in the market, or what you see in the market, because what you talk about is a very different kind of relationship, right? I think it's a phenomenal trust relationship. Not that it, they don't have it with other brands. I'm sure they do, right? But I think there is a very the way you are looking at that market, right? I mean, I've enjoyed my conversation because it's a very different conversation, right? It's a very mature conversation, right? There is a lot of patience. You're willing to give it time, right? something that you don't necessarily see, right? Even at a product level, the way you kind of, you mapped it out, the way you're working on it, the way you're dissecting it, right? I think is absolutely phenomenal, right? And when you look at it from a distance, right, you don't necessarily realize that this is a company which has a very large sales ambition, right? It has an ambition. I'm not disputing that, right? But it is they're willing to give it time, right? And that's a very different uh, it's a very different zone than typically many other companies are in, right? And I think it's, and that's the reason I asked, right? Is this an aberration? I think that's
Yeah,
been at
so
least my
part of it is
sensibility.
also, because of credit to Professor Sunil Handa,
Right.
who's a visiting faculty at IIM Ahmedabad. And he's been an inspiration for almost everybody who's graduated from IIM Ahmedabad in the last 20 years, or
Right.
maybe. He always tells me, यार हड़बड़ी नहीं करेंगे, हम लोग धीरे धीरे बिजनेस बनाएंगे. And he's a phenomenal entrepreneur. He's created so much wealth for himself, and the kind of work which he does for the ecosystem is phenomenal. He's built some very
Right.
large companies which have gone to get listed on the stock exchange.
Right.
But the one thing he always keeps telling me, koi jaldi nahi Anurag. And he has a slightly nasal voice, and he will say that in his nasal voice. And he's very kind to kind of, do a personal visit, make a call whenever possible for him, and say,
Right.
koi jaldi nahi humko. धीरे धीरे करेंगे हम लोग, हमको कोई हड़बड़ी नहीं है, हम लोग सारा काम अच्छे से करेंगे, धीरे धीरे करेंगे.
Interesting.
So I think when you have mentors like these, it kind of keeps you grounded.
I can imagine. Anurag, my last question, I would have wanted them to be independent questions, but my last question, right, with the end of the conversation, experiential is important, right? Touch and feel is very important. Something that we highlighted right at the start of the conversation as well, right? D2C brands and many are coming up, right? And I think eventually they'll have to step up and step out, right? To be available to customers, right? I think that engagement is going to become important, because I think the noise is also going to increase, right? My sense is we're going to see 100,000 brands that are going to come up in next possibly a year and a half to maybe a little more than that, right? So it's going to be a rush, right? Experiential is going to be important, right? So one is, of course, what are your plans on the experiential side of it? And that's number one. Number two, what are the next 2 years like for the brand?
Yeah. So one is that, we spoke about Pilgrim Tribe and how that is an important part of our roadmap. So we want to bring Pilgrim to life, offline.
Right.
Through experiences, through events, through communities.
Right.
This may or may not be restricted, only mean offline retailing.
Right.
Yeah, experience centers or standalone stores or exclusive, business outlets, that is just one part of the story.
Sure.
And it may happen in 1 year from now, it may not happen for another 3 years. We don't know.
Right.
And we'll discover the answer. But what we know for sure is that Pilgrim has to come to life for its consumers.
Right.
And that will happen. Part of it will happen online, but part of it has to happen offline, where we are able to build meaningful communities and bring consumers together to meet each other, experience what Pilgrim stands for, which is experiences, borderless experiences.
Right.
And offline is going to be an important part of it. So that's my, quick take on that.
And what are the next 2 years like?
We already kind of spoke about it. We not in a hurry. We're looking at, serving our consumers by making niche offerings available to them.
Right.
And serving one consumer at a time.
Right.
And if we do the right things, consumers will be kind to us.
And how many uniques are you going to be standing at? How many uniques are you going to be standing at? Unique customers are you going to stand?
How many customers?
Yeah.
So currently we cater to close to 30,000 consumers in a month.
Right.
Yeah. We do hope it is many multifold of that. Time will tell us what.
Anurag, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking time. And honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And not every day you come across an entrepreneur who's like I've been saying this, right? And I think is so patient, right? And wanting and willing to give it time. I think product journeys require that patience, right? And I think your approach, your methodology, your mindset, and the way you're looking at it is essentially a reflection of what is required, right? We wish you all the very best. I think this was, like I said, a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for taking time.
It's been a complete pleasure talking to you, Ashu. Thank you so much for the insightful questions. Also helps us think deeper, probe deeper into what we are. And very happy to have spoken with you.
Super. Thanks.